Motorola took us all by surprise last year with one of the most impressive, affordable smartphones ever. The Moto G wasn't just dirt cheap, it was a fantastic smartphone for anyone just looking for the bare essentials, and even those looking for a little more. Last month, Motorola made the new Moto G, with a larger display and marginal spec improvements, official. Are the upgrades too slight for it still to be such a great deal, or is it perfect just the way it is? We've spent several weeks off and on with the new Moto G. Let's see how it fares. I'm Taylor Martin with Pocketnow, and this is our review of the new Moto G. From the outside, there are only a few things that differentiate this year's Moto G from the last. First and foremost is size. Not only is it larger than last year's Moto G, it's larger than last year's Moto X, both in terms of display size and physical footprint. This year, the Moto G's LCD display measures 5 inches diagonally, though it still features a resolution of just 720p. From our comparison with the original Moto G, we recall that this display bump came at the expense of some brightness and saturation, and of course, it's slightly less dense at 294 pixels per inch. Still, to complain about how many pixels the display on your $180 smartphone has is to miss the point entirely. For the price, the display is killer. No, for the price, the entire hardware package is killer. The design this year is more likened to last year's Moto X, though we might chalk that up to its size. It even comes with aftermarket back covers that you can easily swap to customize your phone. We were sent 2 additional covers, one matte yellow and a textured purple flip cover. This new Moto G also comes with dual front-firing speakers. But they're definitely no boom sound speakers. They're not all that loud and they're pretty darn tinny. However, they will still improve your gaming and multimedia experience dramatically. Like last year, the Moto G comes with 1GB of RAM, 8 or 16GB of fixed storage, a Snapdragon 400 SoC with 1.2 GHz quad-core CPU and Adreno 305 GPU, and the same 2070 mAh fixed battery. The only differences are the cameras. Motorola bumped it from 5 to 8 megapixels on the back and from 1.3 to 2 megapixels up front. It also now has a microSD card slot as well as Wi-Fi 802.11ac. Else, this is practically the same exact phone as last year, only bigger. The same could be said for the software. It ships with Android 4.4.4 and the difference in this year's software and last year's are nearly indistinguishable. This time around, the launcher looks a lot more like the Google Now launcher, sans Google Now integration. Icons are larger, the background in the app drawer is transparent, and widgets have been moved from the dedicated app drawer tab to the home screen edit menu. Motorola also took the last year to update its praised features, like Motorola Assist. In addition to last year's actions, Motorola Assist will now detect when you're driving, something originally reserved for just the Moto X, and speak text messages and incoming calls to you when you're home. Otherwise, this is as close to stock Android as it gets. It's light, frothy, and virtually bloat-free. For that, we're thankful. In a phone that sports a year-old chipset and just 1GB of RAM, you wouldn't expect it to put up monster numbers and benchmarks or wow you in daily performance. The former is true of the new Moto G. It won't blow away benchmarks. In fact, it's one of the weakest aspects of this phone, and that's exactly why we don't put too much faith in benchmarks. Day-to-day performance on the new Moto G is pretty darn snappy. No, not all things considered or not within reason, this phone purrs along pretty smoothly in most scenarios, including heavy gaming or multimedia streaming. None of this is to say that you can't bog the new Moto G down. With just 1GB of RAM, it will be scraping for memory from time to time and aggressively closing apps. And you'll see it struggle to keep up with several successive heavy tasks, but if you're going to be putting this phone through that much stress outside of a testing scenario, you might want to look elsewhere. This Moto G came with an AT&T SIM in it, but we've also popped a T-Mobile SIM in for good measure. Network performance is average. Save for some background noise, call quality was crisp and clear with ample volume. Data speeds, however, are where the Moto G takes a hit. Without LTE connectivity, it's stuck on T-Mobile and AT&T HSPA Plus here in the States. Honestly, the speeds are sufficient, but if you're used to LTE, you'll definitely notice higher latency and slower upload and download speeds. Having not increased the battery size with the larger display, we were skeptical of this Moto G's battery performance. While it's not going to last you 2 full days of usage, its performance is actually very similar to that of last year's Moto G. That, of course, isn't mind-blowing, but it's acceptable. On days of moderate usage, light emails, browsing, tweeting, playing some games, and streaming some music, we had no trouble lasting a full day. However, on heavier days you may need a second charge to last until bedtime. Lastly, the camera. The 5-megapixel camera on the original Moto G was one of its biggest hiccups. It was exactly what you would expect of a budget phone's camera. This year, Motorola bumped the resolution to 8 megapixels. Colors are more true to life than before with higher dynamic range and a wider field of view. But note that this 8-megapixel camera won't hold a candle to, say, the 8-megapixel camera on the iPhone 6 or 6 Plus. It's still quick to overexpose and we'd like more detail in our shots, but for a sub $200 phone, this camera is more than sufficient. So, did Motorola go too light on the improvements? Not at all. The changes might seem minuscule, because they are, but there are at least 2 reasons we're completely okay with that. Motorola got it right the first time by offering a whole lot of value for a very small price, just a fraction of what other comparable smartphones were. And when you're only asking $179 for a smartphone packed with some rather compelling specifications, there isn't a whole lot of room for improvement. But there's even more to the equation. The original Moto G, if you can find one, is still an awesome buy if you feel this phone is too large. That said, if you found the original Moto G to be a hair small for your tastes, this new Moto G will be just what you were looking for. If you're on a tight budget or you simply don't need an over-the-top smartphone, the 2014 Moto G is well worth your cash. No question. Ladies and gents, if you liked this video and found it helpful, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, follow us on your favorite social sites, Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and Instagram at Pocketnow. I'm Taylor Martin, Casper Tech on Twitter, and I will see you next time.